Are you a shooter that's been interested in competitive shooting but not sure where to start? In this episode, we talk about various ways to get started, how to become a sponsored shooter, and what can be done to make the sport even more fun. We sit down with four-time world champion Kolby Pavlock and discuss all things competitive shooting as we head into the Rimfire Challenge World Championships this week. This is the No Excuse to Miss podcast. Welcome to the No Excuse to Miss podcast. I am your host, Scott Valkortson. This week, we are getting ready for the 2021 Rimfire Challenge World Championships being held later this week in Tennessee. So we thought this would be a good time to dive into the world of competitive shooting. And to do that, we have four-time world champion Kolby Pavlock, as well as our director of marketing, Chad Wittrock. How you guys doing today?
Pretty good.
Very well. Excited for the weekend that Worlds is creeping back up on us.
Yeah, it'll be good to be back there after a year hiatus last year. You know, with everything else being canceled, that was one of the casualties as well.
Definitely. And to clarify, we should probably say that this will probably, if you're listening, it'll probably be after the actual Worlds match. So by the time we air this.
So hopefully we have some good results there.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, let's hope so.
But first, I thought I wanted to give a brief background of how we got into Rimfire Challenge. It was originally created by Ruger, which was the Ruger Rimfire Challenge, being held, I'm not sure which year it started. We got involved in 2011 when we were invited out to New Mexico to be a part of that match and do some filming with Michael Bain and different things. And that was really our first introduction into the Rimfire steel game. And it was sort of an eye-opener for us because up until that time, everything we had ever done was precision and accuracy. And we never really took into account like being super lightweight and super fast. So it was a eye-opener for us in the fact that we had to rethink how we did things. And honestly, it's been a huge boost for us because it made us get better in how we produce things, the finishes we use, the way they're done, the testing that we do on stuff now. So, you know, after that match, we got started with one of our first shooters, Allie Barrett at the time, she was a young female shooter. And we kind of learned the ropes together as we went through. And over time, we have built what I like to think is a very good team that represents us very well. Of the last 5 World Rimfire matches that have taken place, our shooters have won those 5, 4 of them by Kolby and 1 by Nate Gibson in 2019. So I thought it'd be fun to jump on here and just talk a little bit about the competitive shooting world and what it involves, some of the myths around it, and some of the things that we think could even become better on a sport that we love. So I'll start with you, Kolby. How did you get into shooting and in particular the Rimfire game?
Yeah, so I started really hunting and going outdoors with my dad at a young age. And then there was a junior shooter program back home in Idaho that it had been my 8th grade year, and I went out and watched one of their practices, and I thought it was super cool. So I was with the program for about a year, and then after that, there was some junior camps out there that like Max Michelle, BJ Norris, and some other professional shooters would do a 2-day camp. And then after that, I kind of started doing things on my own, did a couple classes with JJ Rikaza. And then after that, just kind of started doing things on my own. And then like I started doing Rimfire, Ruger Rimfire. 2012 was my first year, so a little bit like the year after you guys started doing that. And then after that, I did some USPSA and 3-gun. But now I've kind of focused more on the Rimfire and some USPSA and oddly enough some revolver shooting, which is completely different. But
that's because you're getting old. But anyway, no, I'm kidding.
Yeah. But yeah, this has been my 10th year shooting. I enjoy it a lot. I think now that I'm now working for you for Valkortson, I think it's become more of a job. But I also still enjoy going out and competing and seeing some old friends and meeting new people.
So, and I think you touch on something there, meeting new people. That's the one aspect that I didn't expect when we first started going to the match was the camaraderie and the just the willingness for everybody to help each other for the most part.
Yeah.
And the friends that you make, that you look forward to seeing every year that you would have never met through that process.
Yeah. And like, since we didn't have Worlds last year, I haven't seen some people since 2019. So it'll be nice to see people after a long break. So.
And the one thing that's been fun for us too is watching, because so many of the top shooters in the Rimfire world are younger shooters.
Yeah.
So we're literally able to watch them grow before our eyes.
Yeah.
And, in your case, you said you started 10 years ago. So when you were 12,
yep.
You've now gone through your teenage years and still a young guy, but 22. And
yeah, well, it's funny because like some of the kids that I started shooting with, we're all growing up and there's only a handful of them that are still shooting. So watching, like Nate and all these other kids come up, I'm like, dang, this is crazy. Because I remember, it feels like forever ago, but it's, they're 16, 17, and it's crazy watching them come up.
Well, and I'll never forget something you said at one point was as you started going to college and different things, you're like, it's a lot harder to practice now that life has gotten in the way.
Yeah.
Versus, when you're a young kid, that's the only thing you have to focus on is probably school, and
yeah,
you can go shoot. You don't have to worry about work. You don't have to worry about paying the bills and everything else.
Yeah, like going through high school, I was shooting 4 or 5 times a week, and now after school and working full time, it's kind of cut down to just the weekends.
So the one thing that you talk about or that you mentioned is that you had some very good coaches or mentors to kind of get you started.
Yeah.
And now we've seen you evolve into that's kind of become your role to some degree. Obviously, I know you still want to win and compete at the highest level.
Yep.
But I think you've also kind of found a niche in being able to go out and show other people how to shoot. And I think that can be difficult for people that have competed at the highest levels to be able to break down the simple fundamentals with a new shooter.
Yeah.
And not give them too much up front to learn, but just enough of the basics that they can keep improving upon. And I think a perfect example was the UFC event we did a couple weeks ago where you were working with people that had maybe never shot.
Yeah.
To people that had, were, you could tell they had spent some time on the range. But so how has that transition been for you going from, the young kid being coached to now kind of being a coach for other people?
I actually enjoyed it a lot because, when I was younger, the coaches were always like, you always want to give back. So, I felt like I've I wouldn't say hit my, my max with the shooting, but giving back is something that I really enjoy doing and teaching new people and getting more people involved in the sport because, the competitive shooting is kind of like a niche world. So giving my input on it and, giving people the advice that they need is kind of something I really enjoy now.
And something we were talking about before we went live is so many times in today's world, we equate influence to number of Instagram followers.
Yeah.
Which, we've talked, and I know you've talked to Chad on the Instagram side, trying to grow your account and everything. But I think the one thing that has been very interesting is you've proven to start having a lot of influence, not only like with the UFC event and stuff, but I know you help coach the high school teams and the young kids locally.
Yeah.
And you spend time, with actually some customers of ours that ask for an introduction to the Rimfire steel.
Yep.
So, it just proves that you can have influence and a lot of impact without necessarily having 50 or 100,000 followers.
Yeah.
And from a company standpoint, I think stuff like that means more than the wins and the championships. Obviously, we're all competitive. We all want to win. And, you always want to see, like in our case, our company at the top, or in your case, your name at the top. Mm-hmm. But in the grand scheme of things, being able to introduce new people to the sport that may never compete at a sanctioned match, but just give them an introduction, is ultimately what we are looking for. Because in my mind, a sponsored shooter is actually like an ambassador for the company, but more than that, an ambassador for the shooting sports.
Yeah.
And I think we've both seen where, some people get it right. And then there's those that unfortunately get it wrong and
take advantage of the sponsored stuff.
Yes.
Well, I was just thinking, I think you hit on something there too, Scott. Like, Kolby, like how important has it been to you to be approachable on the range? Like, you're very approachable Anyone can walk up and talk to you, ask for advice. Has that always been kind of your mantra, your mindset since you've started?
Yeah, like when I first started, especially with the junior program, the one thing they hit on the most was, being humble, be able to be approachable, because if no one wants to come up and talk to you, you're not fun to be around. Why compete?
Right.
Obviously you want to be competitive, and you still want to have that, that mindset of, I want to be at the top, but you also have to be approachable so people like you and actually want to come up and talk to you. So I've kind of, went from that, and ever since then, just kind of be able to want people to come up and talk to me, because I want to make new friends and, be able to help people when I can.
Right. When you started, did you anticipate initially, right off the bat, where you're like, I'm going to be the best I can possibly be at this? Or did it really start just as kind of a hobby? Or did you really go in right away knowing okay, I'm in this, I'm in this to win it?
It's kind of like both. I wanted to go in and be able to, compete at the highest level and win matches, but I also knew, it's going to take time. It doesn't happen overnight. You got to put it in practice. It's funny, at the Ruger Rimfire match back in 2012, I saw Jim O'Young, his jersey with a bunch of sponsors. And I'm like, man, that'd be cool one day to have sponsors like that. And I've been very fortunate over the years to have great sponsors. So it's pretty cool to come up and go through different views of the competitive stuff.
That's a great way to put it, I think.
And I think that's one thing, we get approached a lot, obviously, how do I become a sponsored shooter?
Yeah.
And the one interesting thing that we've been very fortunate of is almost all the shooters that we've worked with or that have been a part of our team, we have approached all of them, not vice versa.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes from what you were just talking about. We watch how they act on a range. And the biggest thing, at least personally, that I always look for is, how does that person respond when they have adversity? When they have a gun that jams or a malfunction or just a bad stage.
Yeah.
It's easy to be smiling and talking to everybody when everything's clicking and going right. But how do those people respond when adversity hits? And even in that very first match, we were able to see the two polar opposites of how that happened. And later on, there was somebody that was at that match that approached us for sponsorship. And unfortunately for them, I had witnessed what happened during a bad stage. And
yeah, it puts off a bad vibe.
Kicking rocks and blaming, the equipment, blaming everything. And I'm like, that's not something we're interested in.
Yeah.
Because that is part of the game, is even regardless of how well we like to make our equipment, or any company for that matter, at some point there is probably going to be a failure.
But yeah, it's Rimfire. You're about, it's
early morning cold matches can even start to.
Yes. So, and I know, I probably shouldn't even say this, but we had one of the very first matches you shot for us.
Yeah.
I remember getting a text that you had a issue with light hits.
Yeah.
And I was actually, I think, shopping with my wife, and she's like, kept asking, she goes, what is your deal? I'm like, this is driving me crazy.
Yeah.
But that's the other side of it from a company aspect that we enjoy about having sponsored shooters, is they put our guns through paces that most average shooters are not going to. So if there is a design flaw or something that has gone wrong, they're going to let us know first.
Oh, yeah. We're putting 100,000 rounds through guns a year. So, I think that's the perfect time to, if something goes wrong, that's a perfect opportunity to get the input.
And then it's a chance for us to improve upon that. So ultimately, our customers become the benefactor of our competitive shooting team.
Yep.
Because they're getting all those changes or improvements made, and most of them are not going to put 100,000 rounds downrange a year.
No.
So as fun as the shooting sports are, we've talked, the three of us offline, about some different things that we think could make it even better. In your opinion, with 10 years of experience, what do you think are a couple things that we could improve upon as a industry or as a sport?
I think, going with, we have world level matches. I think being able to qualify for a world match would be something that I'd like to see, because, and I see both points. We want to get new people involved in the sport, but at a world level match, I think it needs to feel more like a world match. So having, you have to go shoot 3 sanctioned level matches or like a state level match to get qualified for worlds is something that I'd like to see, just to make it feel more like a world level match. But other than that, I enjoy watching new people come in. So it's a hard thing to do because you want to get more people involved with the Rimfire stuff, but you also want to make it feel like a big match. So,
well, and I think for shooters to be able to get to where they eventually want to go, something for me, and I've talked about this at length, but I think at like a world level match too, I think the number of divisions that we have waters down the end result, and it makes it hard for the casual fan to follow.
Very hard to follow.
I just heard a conversation the other day where they were talking like the same thing in boxing. Right now there's so many divisions, it's hard to know who's dominant and who's who's the man right now. And I think the same thing happens in in our sport. And I understand, like you said, it's great to be able to hand out awards and get new shooters involved. But it also becomes very complicated when somebody asks how one of your shooters did. And you're like, well,
like if you look at the last year we had Worlds, it was funny because it was like, if you look at like the overall results, it went Nate, Cole, me. And it's like, how do you describe like who finished third or fourth? Because, Nate and Cole were shooting 2 different divisions and I was shooting 1 division. Yeah. So it's like who won overall or who took second, and it's hard to distinguish who that is. So
I think we even discussed that, I think, on the drive back, because I was trying to work on social media at the time. So I was asking Scott, like, how do we word this so that someone interested in the sport or someone that's maybe kind of an outlier even understands what we're telling them as far as like results go?
Yeah. With Steel Challenge especially, there's 13 divisions now. You got 4 different Rimfire divisions and then a bunch of Centerfire divisions. It makes it hard to follow, like, well, who's better at this gun or who's better overall. So I think if we were able to kind of narrow it down and have just a certain, like, if it was just all Rimfire and then a couple Centerfire, just so it's easier to follow, would be nice to see.
And I think that would make a big difference for the casual fan.
Yeah.
Because I think for a lot of, gun enthusiasts or shooters that aren't necessarily competitors, it's not really relatable because they can't follow. Like you just said, there's 3 people listed in the top 5 spots.
Yeah.
There's no other sport that we follow or watch that does the same.
No.
So to me, that'd be something that is, if we want shooters to eventually be able to become more mainstream and gain more following, and ultimately down the road, eventually make more money, I think the thing has to be, and I hate to put it this way, but we're going to have winners and losers and not
handing out participation awards.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think that can be different for the junior, even for the junior shooters a little bit.
Yep.
But, we always laugh how, so many people talk about the downfall of having participation trophies and the way sometimes matches are done, making sure we hand out as many awards as possible. We're falling victim to that exact same thing.
Yeah, I agree.
And like you said earlier, I get both sides of it where it's encouraging to get new shooters in. But I think at the same point, obviously I'm a little bit older than you.
A little bit.
You point that out on a regular basis. But, when we were younger, we had winners and losers, and
you could
losing sucked. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah.
And that was the idea. It was supposed to not feel very good.
Yeah.
And just because losing sucks doesn't mean you can't do it graciously. I remember when, Nate unseated you for the world title in 2019. I'm sure you were disappointed, upset with yourself, but outwardly you were very congratulatory to Nate.
Yep.
And I think you were genuinely happy for him.
Yeah, but
at the same time, you were fired up that you didn't win.
Yeah.
But I think and to me, that's what makes a good ambassador, somebody that has that desire to win.
Yeah.
But at the same time can, be happy for other people at the same time.
Yeah, I remember being Nate, 16, 15 at that point. I remember that was about the first time I won World. It's awesome. And then watching him grow up and shoot and being able to shoot with him, it's awesome to watch him win. You know, it sucks that I didn't win, but I mean, that's the name of the game. You put him in practice and it shows the results.
Yeah, and you guys have this like awesome kind of friendly rivalry going on, but and most people probably didn't even know you're driving down to Worlds together this week.
Yeah, we actually since I've moved out here, we actually, especially like going to Steel Challenge Worlds, we actually drive to matches quite a bit together.
That's awesome.
It's fun. You know, we got that little rivalry, but in the end, you know, we're really good friends and we hang out quite a bit, so it's fun.
So a question I have is, you know, I'm big into like mindset and the mental aspect of things.
Yeah.
And obviously a lot of shooting is physical. You have to have lightning quick reflexes and, you know, the muscle memory and all those different skills.
Yeah.
But how much of it is a mental, especially like at the world match where, was it 2 years ago that it was 12 stages or 14
I think
stages?
there was 14 stages.
You know, so it was a long 2-day match.
Yeah.
So
Very
how much
long.
of the mental preparation and staying even keel like throughout, because there's a lot of downtime for people that haven't been to a match. There can be 45 to 60 minutes in between a competitor shooting.
And it can be even longer depending on, you know, the people in front of us. I've been in a match where you shoot and then you got to wait like an hour and a half before you shoot again. So the big, like everyone can shoot. But I think the biggest thing is the mental, like you said. So taking the time, sometimes I'll even put music on just to kind of like calm myself and kind of stay in that groove. But the mental thing, especially at the highest level of shooting, I think is the biggest thing. And you can see it, you know, even when I started coming up when I was younger, the mental thing, you know, I'd have a good string and I was like, oh, I can match that. Well, I couldn't. And then I'd get disappointed in myself and kind of get down. And then you could watch the performance kind of go down. But over the years, I've kind of learned, you know, you got just stay consistent and keep your mind in the same place. And have a more consistent match has been really helpful.
Because the one thing that stuck out to me, like some of those first matches I went to, is if you have a catastrophic stage or, you know, your penalty, it's hard to make up.
Yeah.
You know, when matches are won or lost by, you know, I think when you beat Cole Bush,
yeah, that was
in 2018. I think it was under a quarter-second difference.
Yeah, I think honestly, it was like 0.04 of a second.
Yeah. So so if you have a bad stage where something goes wrong, it's almost impossible to try to make up, you know, that kind of time.
Yeah.
So I think to me that makes the mental part of it even more, like you said, with the consistency.
Yeah.
I think it even brings it back to even that ambassadorship point too, because if you still want to be approachable and still want to be a good ambassador to the sport, and you're coming off either a bad string or even a good string where you feel like mentally you're where you want to be, or maybe mentally you need to get where you want to be, while at the same time you have people approaching you during that hour and a half, like wanting advice or tips. Is that still pretty easy to try and compartmentalize some of that, or is there a way you like to work through that?
Usually, you know, if I have a bad stage or a bad string, after I'm done shooting, I usually like to take, you know, a minute or two, go over to my stuff, get everything situated, and take like a mental breather and just be like, relax, like everything's fine. Right. You know, we're out here having fun. It's a hobby. You know, no one's really making a living, so you know, make sure you're having fun. But after I have like that couple minutes of a cool down, it's like, all right, now I got to go back, do my job, be an ambassador of the sport, and make myself approachable so people can come talk to me.
So 2 follow-up questions to that. One is for new shooters that want to get involved with the sport, like what are some of the things, because it can be intimidating to get into. So what are some of the things they can do? And then secondly, if they do go to a match, is there a right or wrong time to approach a competitor to ask questions? You know, like you said, you'd like to take a couple minutes afterwards, get your stuff together, gather your thoughts.
Yeah.
Take a couple deep breaths.
You know, I think the biggest thing is don't be afraid. You know, come out and watch. I mean, if you're scared to shoot, just come out and watch and get a feel for what's going on. And then while you're out there, you know, ask questions. And then, like you said, when's the best time? If you see someone up shooting, wait till they're done and maybe give them, you know, 5-10 minutes, let them get their things back together, and then go up and talk to them. But don't do it really like when they're getting ready to shoot. So like if they're next up, kind of leave them be. And then right after they're done shooting, kind of give them that time. But other than that, you know, just make yourself approachable, you know, go up and talk to people and ask questions. And, that's the biggest thing.
And I think you bring up a great point that even if you're intimidated to go shoot, go watch a match, and you'll see that even when you do shoot that first match, that even most of the top level shooters, they want you to succeed.
Oh, yeah.
It's at least in my opinion, it's a very welcoming sport.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. As long as you're asking questions, they're willing to help. And it avoids, one, any sort of safety issue.
Yeah.
By just assuming that you know what's going on. But, most shooters understand the more people we bring into the sport, the better off we are.
Yeah.
And that by doing that, they're going to have to answer, questions of the most basic level from shooters that, they may have learned 20 years ago, but.
Yeah.
And back to your point earlier, I think that's a good point too, is, the way the Rimfire Worlds is set up is it's very accommodating to everybody. But I agree with you, that might not be the right spot for a new shooter to go to.
No.
Because the intensity level is ratcheted up a little bit at a world level match.
Oh, yeah.
Where the shooters are more focused, more dialed in, and probably a little less likely to want to spend 30 minutes talking,
yeah.
In between stages.
Yep.
And then switching gears a little bit, like to the marketing side, Chad, I know you're relatively new to the shooting sports.
Yep.
Is there anything that you see that a new shooter or even like, for example, a match director should do to improve their chances of being sponsored or?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We obviously get a lot of sponsorship requests throughout the year from match directors, from aspiring shooters. And we do look at, between us, we look at everyone that comes in. We try to get back to everybody. Unfortunately, it doesn't always happen. To me, I think the biggest thing is really don't be afraid to ask for what you're looking for. I know no one wants to back themselves into a corner with a company by asking, feel like they're over asking, or ask for something that maybe isn't going to work. But it actually makes it easier on me and easier on us as a company if you come in and be like, here's what you could really do to help us out during this match. That helps a lot of back and forth between us internally as far as like, what should we do? What do you think they need? So I guess, yeah, my advice to be, don't be afraid to, be really specific on some things that you're looking for. And it doesn't have to necessarily be one thing, but, give us, 1 to 3 things. Like if you can get us any of these things, that would be great. I don't know if there's anything you'd want to add to that, Scott, but I think to me, like really clarity is the big thing for me.
I would agree with that. And I think to piggyback on that, like for a sponsored shooter or even a match director, everything, at least the way we see it, obviously we want to give back to matches and be a part of the industry because we feel an obligation to do that to help further the sport.
It's actually hard for us to not. I mean, we actually want to sponsor about everything that comes in.
Yeah, and so there is a lot of sponsorship opportunities. So it really, a lot of times we have to look at it as a two-way street of we'll do this for the shooter, but what can they offer us in return? Or why should we sponsor this particular shooter over shooter B?
Yep.
And then sometimes it's tough because, like you said, it'd be fun to be able to sponsor every young shooter that comes through, or
and
every great story we hear.
Yeah, we hear tons of great stories, and there's so many great volunteers. We've talked about the community multiple times this morning. There's so many great volunteers that put a lot of work into these matches. Some matches have 15 people, some matches have 150 people, some matches have hundreds of people. So, we don't like to look at, we just want to do big matches or anything like that. We really try and give everyone a fair shake. And there's so many good people out there trying to push the sport ahead.
And I think one other aspect of that, as like on the competitive shooting side or on the shooter side, is, obviously we don't base everything just on results.
Correct. Yep.
But in my opinion, a lot of times, that person does have to put the time in and the work in. Typically that comes first and then the sponsorship later. And I'm sure, Kolby, when you first started and you were training and doing those camps, you didn't have sponsors just running at you without putting any time in.
Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely wasn't right away. I mean, I think it was 2-3 years after I started shooting before I really had anyone approach me in terms of sponsorship. So, I mean, it's hard doing stuff without sponsors, but you got to work through that.
Yeah, I do think that's a great point because we do get a few of those. I'm looking to start shooting.
Yeah.
What can you do for me? So yeah, I think that's a great point to say, that you do have to put in the time, kind of work your way through that phase, if you will.
Yeah.
And go from there.
So Kolby, did you have to actively go out and look for sponsors? Or did they all come to you for the most part?
There's a couple that I had approached, but most of them, it was actually kind of cool. I was in California shooting the West Coast Steel Challenge back when it was a thing in Piru. And Zev Technologies, they're out of California. They were out of California at the time. And the owner in KC came up to me, and they had been watching me shoot, and they approached me and asked if I wanted a sponsorship. So, there's some of them that I have approached, and then some of them, like you guys, you guys approached me after a couple of years. So, yeah, it's a different, it just depends on what you're looking for, really.
And it's probably one of those things, and you can correct me if I'm wrong though, but getting those first couple sponsorships is probably the toughest.
Yeah.
Because then as you get those, other companies are looking.
Then your name gets out there,
Yeah.
It's, you start putting in results, you get people start talking about you a little bit more. And then once you kind of get those first couple sponsors that, it's difficult because they're like, well, no one knows you, like you're brand new, like who is this kid? But after that first couple, they put out a good word, obviously you got to be a good ambassador on the range and off the range. And then like word spreads. So,
and the one thing we've mentioned a couple times today is the tight knit community. So the good news is if you do carry yourself, in the right manner on the range, word will spread very quickly that, this is a good kid, or this is a, great ambassador, and to me, word of mouth advertising or marketing in that regard goes a long ways.
Yes.
Because we've heard it the other way where a certain name or shooter will get mentioned
and something else comes up.
Yeah, and people are pretty good about not saying anything, but you can usually tell by the grimace on their face or the reaction that, okay, there's more
to the story.
More to the story than what we're seeing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm excited about Worlds. It's going to be fun to be back. It's been a 2-year hiatus.
Yeah.
So, we've touched on you. We've mentioned Cole Bush. We've mentioned Nate Gibson, and Bryce Jones will be down there shooting. All of you guys shoot for us. But outside of our team, who else do you look forward to see or is a threat to win?
I always like to see Grant Kunkel. He's been doing really good at the Steel Challenge. He's been setting some crazy fast times. And then just everyone else, really. It's always good to see people.
Real quickly, we're assuming that a lot of people know the differences between some of these. Can you explain, Grant's doing phenomenal things in the Steel Challenge world. Yeah. Can you explain just a brief overview, the difference between Steel Challenge and Rimfire Challenge and the way the course layout is?
Yeah, so Steel Challenge, it's the same 8 stages are shot throughout the whole U.S. So, you'll see the same 8 stages. But Rimfire Challenge, and let me back that up. Steel Challenge, there's only 5 plates that you're shooting on a stage. Rimfire Challenge, stages can be set up in any order that the match director wants. And there can be up to 7 targets on a stage. So you get, instead of 5 targets for Steel Challenge, Rimfire Challenge, you're shooting up to 7 targets. And they can be anywhere from, I think, 6 inches up to the big 18 by 24 rectangles. And 2 years ago, they had 6-inch plates at 20 yards shooting with iron sight pistol. I mean, it's difficult. So the Steel Challenge, I feel like, is once you get up to that level, a lot of it's muscle memory. But the Rimfire Challenge, I feel like, really shows who's the better rimfire shooter. It breaks down more skill instead of just the
muscle memory,
muscle memory component,
muscle memory kind of stuff.
Yeah. So and that's why you can have standardized times on the Steel Challenge.
Yeah, because
those course layouts are the same. Whether you're shooting the world match or a local match.
Yep. Yeah, you kind of with Steel Challenge, they have a classification set up now. So they'll take whoever shot the fastest stage time. They'll set that as the highest percentage, and then from there, so you kind of have something that you can look forward to. Like Grant shot like a 480 on Smoke and Hope total time. That's just ridiculous, but it gives you something to kind of work for. But Rimfire Challenge, you can go in not knowing what a stage time can be. You can be anywhere from a second and a half up to a 4-second stage, so it's different.
So, last question for you is, what do you think can be done in the shooting community or the shooting sports that, down the road allows quote unquote pro shooters to be able, because very few people make a living shooting.
Yeah. Very few.
A lot of them end up doing something similar to what you're doing right now. They'll go work for a manufacturer. They work in the industry that allows them to shoot.
Yeah.
But, there's probably less than a handful of people that we could name that their entire career is shooting.
Yeah.
So what, in your opinion, and I realize this isn't an easy answer that can be done, to start to generate more revenue for the pro shooter?
Jesus. I think the big thing is kind of like the prize table situation. Sometimes you'll see random draw, and then sometimes you'll see order of finish. I'd like to see either with Steel Challenge, you got the area matches and then worlds. They actually do it how I would like to see it. They do it in terms of order of finish. So if you're putting in the work, you're gonna get something in return. So like you can walk away with a gun. You can either sell it, or they'll do cash payback. But sometimes with the random draw, you're putting in all this time, you're winning. It's all about winning, but you get to a point where I'm at now, I got to pay for this stuff. So, I want to see something where I can go put in the time and effort and then walk away with a prize that kind of like the money return, I guess, in a way. So I'd like to see more order of finish prize tables.
And I think I would even like to see, and I realize this is probably a more expensive way to do it from the company side, but on some of these bigger matches, even for like the top 3 or top 5, and this goes back to having clear-cut winners.
Yeah.
But have, cash payouts for some of those top prizes.
Yeah.
Because I know it can get difficult when it is just prizes, because usually the top shooters have some sort of sponsorship affiliation.
Yeah.
So if they win, I'll use us for example, if they win one of our pistols or one of our rifles, clearly they're going to turn and sell it.
Yep.
Because of the sponsorship conflict, which I completely understand. But if we could somehow get to the point that there are cash payouts for those,
yeah,
I think that would help drive that. I think it'd be more fun to watch.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing too that we've talked about is, I think if we could do even more like man on man or person on person, I should say, shooting.
Yeah.
Because I think that's more fun, like if you're trying to stream it or...
Well, it's easy to follow, too.
Yes.
Most of the time we'll do 6 plates on each side, and then there's a crossover plate that you have to shoot. So like, where everyone's at, and whoever gets that cross plate down first. Usually.
And I think there can be more gamesmanship taking place then.
Yeah.
Because you can have... like you said earlier, shooting 12 stages and winning that match takes a lot of consistency.
Yep.
But you can have... anybody can have a very good day and outrun a shooter that's typically better than them.
Yeah.
Which I think makes like the man-on-man shooting so fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think there's little things that we can do, because I know Chad and I have talked about this, trying to collect content or pictures or videos from a match. After you do 2 to 3 matches, they all look the same.
Yeah. Yeah. You could use those same pictures like all year.
Yep.
Yes. And to a lot of people, it's not really relatable, like when you guys shoot a stage in a second.
Yeah.
It's hard for them to fathom that, but anybody can relate to head-to-head competition.
Yeah, it's drag racing at that point.
Yes.
It's like who can lay down the faster time.
And it doesn't even necessarily become what that time is.
Yeah.
It's just that you have to be faster than the guy next to you.
Well, it's crazy. You get that, man versus man stuff. You start missing, and the other person looks over like, oh, I got to, shoot faster. Or I just got to do my thing. So it kind of gets more mental at that point too.
Yeah, so I think there's some things that we could do as we move forward that make, and not that there's really anything wrong with it because it's such a fun sport,
Yeah.
but just that would allow more people to be involved and make it easier to follow for the casual fan.
I agree.
And I think the more casual fans we get involved, back to the whole thing, the more revenue it drives and the more sponsorship dollars that come in.
Yep.
But it's going to be tough, when we have all those different divisions, and it can be somewhat watered down of who's the actual winner. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the one of the things that kind of makes me laugh, and it happens all the time, is because we're such an Instagram society, that then the shooter can manipulate those results.
Yeah.
and I've been following this for a long time, and I'll get confused on where the person actually finished.
Yeah. Yep.
And I was at the match. Well, does anybody have anything else?
I think that's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
I'm going to need it.
Want to make any predictions?
No. Nope.
Well, regardless, I think, of how it ends, I think we'll all have fun.
Yeah.
It'll be, like you said earlier, it'll be good to see these people. A lot of them we haven't seen in 2 years.
Yeah.
It's a new venue down in Tennessee. So I think that adds an element of excitement.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I'm excited.
The weather should be good. A couple long days of shooting, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's going to be a long weekend, but it'll be worth it and it'll be fun.
Yeah, it'll be fun. So we will follow up with results and let everybody know how Kolby does as well as his teammates and try to declare an actual winner.
Yeah.
Well, as always, thank you guys for listening. And if you could do us a favor and leave a review on wherever you listen to podcasts, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.